Not every rule is written. Not every rule is written in society, and not every rule is written in sports. Plenty of unwritten rules in sports. Welcome to the Sports Pod Time Machine, everybody. I'm Dimitri Draktis, as always, joined by Pete Sod and Rich Glanzer. We're flying through the past, reliving, discussing, and debating the greatest moments in sports. And today, we're talking about the unwritten rules. Pete, what's going on, brother?
Not much. I find the unwritten rules to be highly annoying. We'll leave it at that.
Pete says that there's a reason they were not written. Rich, what's going on, man?
The unwritten rules need to go from a giant book to a tiny pamphlet, but they still need to exist.
So as we get in our time machine, and welcome aboard the time machine, everybody, wherever, however, whenever you're listening, we thank you for joining us. Welcome aboard as we fly through time. And during the pandemic season of baseball, this unwritten rule conversation kicked up, specifically when Fernando Tatis homered on a 3-0 count in a game that the Padres were comfortably ahead. So we're going to go right there. I think these unwritten rules are most prevalent in Major League Baseball. They exist through all the sports. But so far, Rich, Pete, not big fans of the unwritten rules. I think there's a reason for them. That's why they were there. And not every rule can be written. I started by saying in society, there are unwritten rules. You need rules. Civilization needs rules. Society needs rules. And not every rule can be written. And it's the same thing in sports. So, Rich, yes, some rules, unwritten rules, need to exist. Like you say, some of them must go. Let's go right after it. This conversation basically kind of kicked off. And again, we don't know when you're listening, but the conversation heated up again in Major League Baseball when Tatis homered on a 3-0 count. So specifically right there, Tatis right, Tatis wrong, Rich.
Oh, 100%. Well, he was right for hitting home run and wrong for apologizing. I mean, the thing is, you have to look at the totality of everything. One, I'm sure his agent is happy that he has one more home run, 4 more RBIs, and a better batting average and on-base percentage. Those 4 RBIs especially. So I mean, going into a contract, if you just say, you know what, every time we're up or down by 6, I'm going to strike out, you're not going to make that much money. But more than that, it's still a game when, you're up 6, 7 runs and you make it 10, 11 runs. Well, now the game goes from we're probably going to win to we're almost definitely going to win. I couldn't believe the manager and his teammates are giving him crap. I mean, if you look, it's funny. The Mets played that night, and they were up by 7 runs. And sure enough, and I knew it was going to happen, sure enough, they got their best reliever warmed up that night because in the 9th inning, the other team loaded the bases, and the Mets, they didn't end up using Lugo, but they still warmed him up, and he couldn't pitch the next night because of that. And I'm sure the Mets wish they would have scored a few more runs so they had Lugo the next night. So even though the Padres won comfortably, I mean, the Padres won a lot comfortably, they didn't have to use their best relievers because of that. They didn't have to warm up anyone because of that. So I just think that it's ridiculous that the unwritten rules now start at 6 or 7 runs. I mean, you're talking about 14 or 15 runs, then we have a conversation.
And the problem with unwritten rules is they can just change. You can make them up as you go along. But 3-0, so if I can't swing 3-0, then do you have to throw me a fastball on 3-1? And if I stop competing, if players stop competing to the point that they're giving up at bats, which basically renders the entire game over, then are you going to refund the fans who have to sit through the last few innings? Are you going to refund the advertisers? Are you going to refund the cable subscribers? Right? There's still a game that's happening. And that's on the pro level. That's on the pro level. Below the pro level, so even if you're at the point where, you're playing station-to-station baseball, because once you get below the pro level, I understand you don't want to run the score up on anybody, so you say, okay, we're going to play station-to-station. But even if you're at that point, you never give up an at-bat. We tell that to kids in Little League. You don't give up an at-bat. You don't give up an at-bat as a batter. You don't give up an at-bat as a pitcher because that's when you stop growing. You need to keep getting better with each at-bat. So even if you're at the point where, okay, we don't want to run up the score, we've hit a certain point where, sportsmanship has to kick in, and that's going to happen on a lot of levels. Okay, even at the pro level, it's going to be there. You still just can't give an at-bat and stop competing on the lower levels because you're going to stop developing. You can't give up an at-bat at the pro level because, people are paying to see the game. People are paying to subscribe to these regional cable networks, and advertisers are paying for commercial time. So what, we just now stop and no one does anything? That's just ridiculous. And to your point, how much is enough? Is it just some random thing? Well, it's a 4-run lead. And throughout the years of watching baseball, different announcers, as you watch, especially color commentators, kind of make this up as they go along. Well, a 5-run lead, you can't steal or swing 3-0 if it's 5 or if it's 6 or if it's 8 or if it's 10. Who makes this stuff up? So I'm with you, Pete. What do you say?
I'm with you guys. It's a bit ridiculous. I mean, it's a vestige of the sport. It's a vestige of how the sport began as a drunken, violent sport. Deadspin did an article on it in 2019. Stephen Goldman was the author. And the best quote out of the entire article is, the code came into being not because arbiters didn't want to, as MLB has it now, let the kids play, but rather because it was too dangerous to let the kids play. The sport was a dangerous sport, so there are certain rules that, teams just sort of followed to make sure that bad shit didn't happen on the field. But at some point, you got to let everyone play. You're making a great point here, Dimitri. You're at bat. You're paid to be a hitter, basically, in baseball. Your average matters. And all of a sudden, you're supposed to give up an at-bat where you could drive in a run, drive in 4 runs, get on base, get an RBI, get 4 RBIs. You're basically hindering a player from possibly taking the next step in his pro career. It doesn't make any sense any longer.
So then here's this one. Bunting to break up a no-hitter, Pete.
It's fucking ridiculous. A bunt has been part of the game since the game began. And you know what? If you're willing to lay down a bunt to get on base, so be it. It's part of the game. Deal with it. You know what? If that pitcher and that defense is good enough, you're not getting on the bag. So I have no problem with bunting to get on base during a no-hitter. None at all.
Rich, bunting to break up a no-hitter.
So I'm a little more old school than both of you guys, obviously. The Overton window, to me, I'm kind of changing on this one. Of course, the score matters. I mean, I've seen people get yelled at in a 1-run game. It's like a 1-run game. Get out of here. But if it's 12-0 and you're bunting to get a hit, I'm probably still against it. But at the same token, I'm not going crazy on it. It's not a hill I'm willing to die for. I wouldn't do it personally, but I probably wouldn't get mad if I was the pitcher and someone did it to me.
Yeah, I mean, listen, if you want to be one of these pitchers who is going to be one of the 300-plus pitchers to pitch the no-hitter, or pitch one of the 303 no-hitters as of the time of this broadcast, or if you want to be one of these guys who pitches as 23 perfect games in history, then you have to earn it. So the idea that you can't bunt to break up a no-hitter is absolutely nonsense. Pitchers don't dictate what the batter does. The batter's job is to get on base. And the beautiful thing about baseball is there's no clock. You get 27 outs. So you get to keep extending the game until they get you out 27 times. So if the way that you're going to get on base is by bunting, that's part of the game. And the defense has to take that away from you. The pitcher has to take that away from you. So that whole thing is ridiculous. I think one of the famous ones was Kenny Lofton bunting against Jim Abbott. The Indians are down 4-0. The Indians are out of it. It's September 1993. Of course, Jim Abbott, the pitcher with one arm, is a few outs from a no-hitter. Lofton tries to bunt to break it up. Everyone got on him for that. But the reality is that's his job. And if that's what the defense gives you, you take that. You don't just stop competing. People talk about it as respect for the pitcher who's going after this illustrious achievement. But you owe it to your teammates and to your fans to continue to compete. So that's a nonsense one. You guys have other ones you want to throw out? I mean, the one one that makes sense, and it's one you don't see much. Don't cross the pitcher's mound. Don't walk across the pitcher's mound. Listen, there's personal space in life, right? I mean, you could be out walking your dog, Rich. You don't want someone to come right up in front of you. So there is something. Listen, this is competition. The competitive juices are flowing. There's no reason for you to go face to face with an opponent when it's not necessary. So that one I get. There's no need after you make an out, you head back to the dugout. There's no need for you to run across the pitcher's mound or run across the face of the pitcher. That one, it's an etiquette thing that I can understand because that, like I said, I understand that one in life.
I'm more interested in the ones that affect the game. So, I don't really care about.
So which ones affect the game?
So, stealing, right? I'm against stealing if you're up by 12 runs, 10 runs maybe. I probably wouldn't steal a base. Also depends what inning, and how your bullpen is and what pitcher you have, because there's a lot of variance. If we're in the second inning, all bets are off. But if I'm up 13 runs, I'm probably not stealing. I'm probably not bunting. That's the type of unwritten rule that I still think should exist. I'll still swing 3-0 because, like I said, I might want to get out of a slump. I might, I want my contract to be better than it was. I probably would not bunt and I probably would not steal up by like 10 or more runs, I would think. But
well, at that point,
that's kind of,
yeah, at that point, you're just doing that to pad your stats, I would imagine, right? I mean, if you're trying to steal up 10 or up 12. So now there's gamesmanship. If I'm the other team, I let you have the base and you don't get that stolen base anyway. Right?
Yeah, but you don't want to just do. First off, that's up to that. A lot.
I mean, but that's what you're doing. So I can play that game too. You're only doing it to pad your stats. So I'm not going to let you pad your stats. Right? So that gets into the gamesmanship. But I agree with that. You hit a point where, what are you padding your stats for? What are you doing? But there is a point. I just don't know what that number is though, because especially in the modern game, people can put offensive numbers up real quick. So when I hear guys, and I have a lot of respect for Ron Darling, and so I don't want to quote him exactly. I love him doing the Met telecasts, but sometimes that number for him has been pretty low. Like he'll talk about 5 runs or 4 runs or 6 runs. It's like, hold on a second. No, because teams can easily put up a 4, 5, or 6 spot. So yeah, go ahead, Richie.
Darling, it was funny because they asked Darling and Keith Hernandez, the two Met announcers, and Tatis was wrong. But the best part was Ron Darling's like, because Hernandez, what would we have done in the 80s if they'd done that? And Darling's like, we would have hit the next batter and we would have been wrong to do so. He said something to that effect. He's like, he changed his opinion. He goes, like I was talking about the Overton window, things have changed. Whatever the players of today should determine the unwritten rules, right? Like the players of today. So like a pimping home run, when you throw your bat, when you pimp a home run, it probably wasn't that accepted back in the 80s. But now I think today's generation likes it, and it's not as, so I think they should be the ones to decide. I'll say this: it's about respect. It's about not disrespecting your opponent. It's about respecting the game. And if pimping a home run is not disrespecting the other opponent and it's not disrespecting the game, then we all want to see it. I want to see people pimp home runs. I enjoy that. I think the players of today enjoy it.
You mean showboating when you hit a home run?
Like showboating.
Well, let me give you a good example. I've been watching a lot of KBO because before MLB started up, that was all that was on. So you're watching it, and in the Korean League, every home run has a bat flip. And the fans love it. And the league has figured out that, let it happen. Because if you let it happen, more fans are going to watch and more people are going to be watching the game because it's something they enjoy. If it draws more people in, and let's be honest, we've discussed this a million times, baseball has problems. It might just be time to be like, you know what? We need somebody, or we need our players to be much more – they need to showboat. They need to actually be more like an entertainer and not necessarily playing sport, an athlete. They got to be the entertainment part as well.
Show personality.
They got to show it because baseball, let's be honest, once again, is struggling. It does not hurt if it helps the game.
Yeah, and I think these unwritten rules, in a sense, have to be written or unwritten by the culture, right? Culture changes, so the unwritten rules are going to change. The unwritten rules are a product of the culture at the time. So the culture of the 60s, 70s, 80s is different than the culture of today. So just because older ball players don't appreciate this styling and profiling and showboating, that doesn't mean that it's not right today.
I love it.
What's that?
A Ric Flair reference. Way to drop Ric Flair into this.
It doesn't mean that it's not appropriate today because it wasn't appropriate then. Again, it's an unwritten rule, and that's something that's impacted by culture. So I think you're right there. Now, sign stealing. Where are we going with sign stealing? And as we learned with the Astros, I think there's different levels of sign stealing, Rich.
I mean, listen. I want to get back to the culture thing in a second, but with sign stealing, I mean, listen, it's legal unless you do it illegally. It's legal unless right. you know. So I think I think literally everyone agrees with that. I don't think that's really a controversy. I think the Astros would agree with that. So I think if you do it from second base, great. If you do it from a
Not
video
everybody agrees with it, but I agree with it. You're right. It's part of the game. And if you've played sports, it's just what you try to do. You try to steal the other team's signs, and they try to prevent it. Now, if you're going to go to the Astros and the Red Sox level where you're going to use illegal means to do it, and you're going to use video technology, and you're going to use the eye in the sky, that's something different. But a part of the game since the beginning is the other team's going to flash signs. I'm going to try to read them. I'm going to try to convey them back to my own teammates. I mean, that's just been going on forever. And like you said, that's part of it. Although I wouldn't agree that everyone just accepts that. I think there's a lot of fans who maybe haven't played or maybe played to a certain level that think like, that's just totally wrong. I don't think it's wrong. I think it's a part of the game until you get to a part where you're doing it through illegal means or through means that the other team can't prevent. Right? I can change my signs to stop you from stealing them. When you get a runner on second, or when you're in a position where I think you might be able to catch my signs, but I shouldn't have to account for a camera that's hidden in the scoreboard, So I think that's the difference. Pete, what do you say?
I got to agree with you 100%. There's no argument in that. It's been part of the game since the game started in the 1800s. People have been reading signs forever, but once you take that next step where you're putting cameras out there, you use an electronic means to figure it out, that's not the game. That's not what's been done. So that's, once again, there's a point where it's something that needs to be.
Matter of fact, in 1872, I was on second base for the, and P.P. Levinston was catching, and I was able to steal his signs, and we won that game by a lot.
Well, Rich loves to talk a lot about his senior league, and he does go way, way, way back. So he's lived through a lot of this. And you wanted to talk about the change in culture, though.
So it's funny. I'm watching a Met Nationals game. Now, I have to admit, I love Juan Soto. I hate Juan Soto. I hate that guy. I love him, though.
I wish he was on your team.
Yeah. Like
would be for the next 15 years.
This guy's going to be a problem for the Mets for a long time, until the Washington can't sign him, and then the Phillies do, and he'll still be a problem. Anyways, so he was, he wasn't back from his COVID. He was back from COVID, but he wasn't playing yet. So they hit a home run. Matz is pitching. So, of course, the Nationals hit a home run. And Juan Soto goes on the dugout and starts dancing. And I'm just like, and the Met announcer didn't say anything, but I'm like, this is crazy. Like I've never seen this. And it was amazing. It was so much fun. I loved that. I was like, this is what baseball should be. This is great. Now, if I'm Steven Matz of the Mets, I don't like it. If someone did that to me when I was playing,
play better and stop him.
Exactly.
Let me take it a step. Well, you know what? Not to cut you off because I do want to go back to it because it's important. But then do you approve of Steven Matz saying, you know what? Because you did that, I'm going to hit your teammate, so you stop doing that?
I personally don't like beanballs because that could injure people. So I kind of find that cowardly. I've always found that cowardly. I always felt like, oh, we're such a tough team. We throw a baseball at somebody and they can't protect themselves. So I never saw how that was manly in the first place.
Right.
Having said
Steven
that,
Matz, pitch better. Stop giving up the home runs.
Yeah, that's kind of where I believe. But having said that, if you are gonna, I would understand if the Mets threw at the Nationals there for that reason. Like, hey, I mean,
but then you're never going to have celebrations in the game, though. So I think there's times where you want to send the message. It is a sport. We're competing. But that's not it. I don't think we need to phase these celebrations out of the game. I don't think we need to police these celebrations.
We have to phase the celebrations in so that they become more acceptable.
Stop throwing at a guy's head when he's dancing in the dugout. So because this is what you said, culture. Unwritten rules are defined by culture. And this new generation of baseball fan is not the same as the 70-year-old generation of baseball fan. They want to see guys dancing and high-fiving and flipping the bat. That's how you relate to fans. So I think it's a good thing, even though it would have been an unwritten rule not to do that, X amount of years ago.
Well, look at the NFL. For all those years, it was the no fun league. They didn't allow any celebrating. And then all of a sudden they started, and fans enjoy it. Makes people want to watch. Makes people enjoy it some more. It's something that works, and Major League Baseball, as we've discussed 1,000,001 times, is always behind the curve. I think there should be there's nothing wrong with someone dancing in the dugout, having a good time, enjoying what they're doing, showing the love for the game that they actually have. And at that point, you shouldn't be throwing at them. It's just let it go, let it go.
We're well on our way for that happening, by the way. Like, I mean, there was just you didn't see anybody on Twitter at all defending the Padres management or Texas players. They all defended Tatis. Pitchers, very much included, told them, celebrate as much as you want. Bauer, especially Trevor Bauer, was like,
if Twitter feels that way, then that's what we're going with.
No,
It
but I mean,
has to be true.
I literally think.
No, you're right. You're right. Absolutely, we're going that way. And we're going that way. You talked about culture because, listen, we're not the only culture that plays baseball. We think we are, but in Asia, that part of the culture is having fun, is celebrating. In Latin America, in the Caribbean, part of their culture is having fun, is celebrating. So when we kind of try to legislate the fun out of the game, not necessarily with the written rules, but with the unwritten rules, okay, maybe that worked 20 years ago, or maybe that was appropriate 20 years ago. But as there's more of a global influence in the game, now it's more appropriate. And honestly, even without the global influence, our own generation here wants to see people expressing themselves, want to see players having fun. And by the way, that's also how you market players, by showing off their personalities, right? That's how you reach out to a new generation of fans. That's how you sell commercial ads. That's how you sell your league, is by players having these personalities, not just being these robots that follow this archetype that they're all, or this prototype where they're all the same.
You know what? Like, what Major League Baseball did a really smart thing by making the World Baseball Classic, the WBC. Most people don't watch it. I love it. I watched it because it's way more entertaining than spring training. There's really nothing else for me going on. I'm not a big college basketball fan. So I started watching it, and I loved it. And it really changed my opinion. Watching the Latin players celebrate every hit, every RBI, it was so much fun. I was rooting for America because I'm patriotic, USA. But I was like, these guys are having a blast. I was like, man, that's so much fun. I kind of wish I did that when I played sports. It's just, look how much fun they're having.
It's infectious.
Yeah, and it was just so much, and I gained so much respect for them, for the way they were celebrating, and it's just like they weren't trying to put the Americans down or the other team down. They were never trying to do that. It was never a disrespectful thing. They were just having fun, and they didn't get offended when other teams did it to them. So I think that's where some of the old fuddy-duddies like Keith Hernandez, who's great. We all love Keith. But I think he's kind of got to realize the game has evolved. It's not his game anymore. It's Juan Soto's.
Yeah, and it's going to appeal to more. Not only will fans want to watch it because it's infectious, but more young kids are going to want to play it. And you just grow the sport this way. So that's a place where the unwritten rules kind of need to change with the times. I mean, are there any other that jump out at you in baseball?
I got one. Tossing back the opponent's ball.
So from the fans, from the fan side.
Oh my God, it pisses me off. Take it and enjoy the fact that you actually caught either a foul ball or a home run ball. It's one of the few sports, the ball goes into the crowd and you get to keep it. Why are you throwing it back? I get it to a point, but Jesus Christ, keep the ball.
It's a Wrigley Field tradition. It should be, the Cub fans should always throw back a home run because that's what Cub fans do, and it should be, and no one else should do it because it's the Cubs fans and Trout's trying to steal it. If I ever catch it, I've caught 3 foul balls, 1 on a fly. If I ever caught a home run ball, I don't care if it's Game 7 of the World Series and the Mets lose. I'm keeping it.
Yeah. And the other one with that is giving the ball to a kid. Yeah, it's nice to give the ball to a kid, but you don't know what's going on in that person's life. So when everybody gets on a guy because they won't give the ball to a kid, how do you know they're not bringing it home to their 5-year-old? How do you know they're not bringing it home to a nephew? So yeah, I would love to see everybody give the ball to a kid, but man, it's so bad when they put the camera on the guy and you see the fans are heckling, even the announcers are giving a hard time. You don't know what that guy is going home to. I could be at a game, I caught a ball, I want to bring it home to my son, and man, everyone's getting on me thinking I'm this terrible person because I won't give it to the kid next to me. So that's, an unwritten rule on the fan side. I get the idea of wanting to give the foul ball to the kid, but you've got no idea what that person's intentions are.
By the way, I might want to keep it for myself and not give it to a stupid, snotty kid. Let me tell you something. I'm going to tell you a story about when I first got my first foul ball. It was May 23rd, my birthday. David Segui hit it, and it was rolling right to a pretty girl, like a 30-year-old girl. I was around 23 at the time. I dove.
This was 40, right?
I think it was 95. Tore up my knee. My pads my knee, and I swiped it. She jumps on it because she thought it was just going to go to her. She didn't see me running, and the fans started booing me, and then they started cheering because Segui hit a home run. But the point was, I actually had 5.
Segui picked you up there.
Yeah,
great job, Dave.
But I actually had 5 batting practice balls, so I was a little bit of a ball hawk. So I gave her one of those. She gave me a kiss on the cheek. There's all the true stories. Pretty cool. And I found the ball in my trunk a couple months ago from 1995, I think it was. But the point is, I was never giving it to a kid. I never would give it to a kid. I'm going to keep it for myself because I want to keep it for myself. And I think that's fine. And
you're an awful person. Pete.
Man, Rich, you are definitely a strange bird. And
you just said that you don't have to give it to a kid. You just said that.
Well, I under the assumption that you're bringing it home to give to another kid. I don't know. I don't know that you're coming home. I thought you're going to keep it and bring it home to your niece or your nephew. I didn't know you know.
How many generation is the worst generation ever? Let me tell you something real quickly. Earn it. I never wanted a ball.
Get off my lawn.
I wanted to earn it. I didn't want anyone to give me a ball. I wanted to catch it myself. And when I did that day, when I was 23, I was so happy. I was like, oh my God, I finally got a foul ball. This is amazing. I have 3 in my life.
How many batting practice balls did you get that day?
Oh, I had 5. No, batting practice balls I could give to a kid. I don't
You want to catch a gamer.
Yeah.
I can understand.
You're still a pretty bad human being. You really are.
But independent of that, I'll agree to that, but independent of this.
So, all right. Listen, so we got that with baseball. If you go, it's interesting because I think these impact the game of baseball more than any other. And maybe it just has to do with the tradition of the game, the tradition of our country. You go to the other sports with football. And I think with football, it's a brutal game, dude. It's a game of gladiators. It's gladiators, warriors, win at all costs. So I don't know that you have too many of these unwritten rules. There's a big one. The big one is don't intentionally try to injure another player. But they can't follow that anyway. So they can't follow that, and that's why you have to legislate it into the game to where you have rules like, no targeting or no chop blocks, no blocks behind the back. So really the one unwritten rule was, listen, we're going to be aggressive. We're going to, in a sense, try to kill each other legally, but we make a living off of this, so we can't intentionally hurt each other. But they were doing that anyway because the game is so brutal that it's just going to be the nature of what happens. And so the unwritten rules kind of became the written rules anyway, especially recently with targeting. The other unwritten rules in football, they're more like clubhouse protocols or they're strategy ones, unless there's things I'm not thinking of, guys.
Well, I think, if you're up by 28 with 3 minutes to go, you're not going to throw a bomb. I think you're not going to try to score. You're not going to be throwing the quarterback's going to be handing the ball off. So I think
that's given in every sport that you might. Well, it's not necessarily given because not everybody plays that way. I mean, you're not always going to see that. But for the most part, we can agree that there's a respect thing, a sportsmanship thing where you hit a certain, you get a certain lead, you're going to lay off. Not that it happens all the time, but that'd be a good idea to do that, to not embarrass your opponent.
And a little different in football because, in basketball, you still have 24 seconds. It's more insulting if you don't shoot in basketball and just commit a 24-second violation every time you have the ball up by 30. It'd be more insulting in baseball if you just took strike 3 every time and didn't swing. It'd be more insulting in hockey if you just dumped the puck and never, ever tried to score up by 4 or 5 goals. So in football, though, it's a little different because you specifically are just running the ball or just doing a really short pass on third down maybe. So,
and if you happen to score that way, you score that way, but you didn't throw the heavy artillery at them for lack
So
of
I kind of feel like, remember when the 49ers played the Chargers in the Super Bowl and they had, Steve Young threw a bomb to Deion Sanders up by when they were up by I think 80 or 90. And it was incomplete, but, and as much as the Chargers probably were pissed off at that, throughout that season, I guess they were practicing. They wanted Deion to get a touchdown. And I think that's hey, listen, sorry. We want this for us. We won't do it. We won't do it. We won't keep on doing it, but we're going to take one shot. And I think you kind of got to understand that. And that's
in that moment. I guess the other moment like that was the Bears Patriots Super Bowl, where they want Refrigerator Perry to get the touchdown. And he does. And you got to, if you're a Patriot or if you're in New England, you're thinking, really? Come on, man. You really need the lineman to score against us? You have the Super Bowl. But ultimately, that winds up backfiring on the Bears because while Refrigerator Perry gets the touchdown, who didn't was Walter Payton.
Walter Payton, unbelievable.
Right. So,
unbelievable.
Yeah, so that kind of backfires on them. So, you have those moments on those big stages. But overall, we can agree that for the most part, the proper thing is we're not going to humiliate our opponent. Right. In every sport. Well, outside of that, though, I don't know what they are in football. Like football has strategy ones. Like they talk about the unwritten rules in football, but it's more like strategy stuff. Like don't take points off the board or only go for 2 when the chart tells you. Like those are kind of when they talk about the football unwritten rules. It's them, but that's kind of a different thing, right?
I got one for you guys, but it's football. You know, your two sports, soccer. So
Soccer's got a great one, by the way. But go ahead. You might be talking.
So what was your take when the USA played Thailand and they won 13-0 and Megan Rapinoe went nuts when it was 9-0? She scored, she slid, she did some bicycle kicks. The girls on the sideline who never ever get to play and still don't get to play when they're down 9-0 for some reason. When
they were in the game. Alex
Morgan scored. What's that?
Oh, the players got to play.
Okay. Alex Morgan scored 5 goals and she's going crazy. And I get you have to score goals. I don't know if you need to score 13, but I get you needed to score goals for tiebreaker reasons. Fine, but I was so disgusted with how I rooted against them because of that. And then of course we're getting called sexist for it, which had nothing to do with it. It's just like any team that does that in any sport deserves scorn. And I was disgusted. A lot of Americans were disgusted. A lot of the Canadian soccer team was disgusted. They're like, you guys are the best in the world. If it's a scrub that scores, celebrate. But Megan Rapinoe, come on.
Well, yeah, no, I think it was excessive. You're only allowed the 3. It's not like you can empty your bench because you're allowed 3 substitutions. And then you do get to the point where you just said, well, what am I supposed to do? Not play? So would it have been more insulting? Now, first of all, if you don't get those 13 against Taiwan, what if the next team does go put up 13 against Taiwan and you don't get the tiebreaker? So there is that. But, okay, I understand. You're the best team in the world. Now, you can't empty the bench. You're only allowed – I get that. And there are some character flaws on some of the players on that team. So there's no reason to argue that. I agree with that. I think the other part of it, though, is that on that stage, man, you play your whole life to get to that stage. The excitement, that's a real excitement. And these also are players that – for the female soccer players, the international stage is really the only stage, for them. They have their professional league. They play Division I, but this is when they're in front of the whole world. And I think it's hard to contain that. It's hard to keep that in. And it's also hard to put an on-off switch. You only get a few games in these tournaments. And the idea that you're just going to turn it off, that's a tough thing. Now, maybe the celebrations didn't have to be there. But, man, you want to be a champion, you're always going. The motor's always going. So, when you say disgusted, this, that, it's you can see it from their point of view. Okay, when you get to the 12th or 13th, but when do you turn it off? Because the reality is you can only sub in 3 players. That's all you're allowed to do. So the team is 8 of the guys who started have to finish the game.
It's not that they scored the 13 goals. I mean, I felt that was probably a little much, but it's the fact that they just celebrated like they won the World Cup, like it was the golden goal, as you people say. It was just like
no. And I can't totally. Again, I do think that if we get into the players on that team, I think there's so many of them, some that I know and I think are great and I think are great role models.
Yeah.
There are some that have certain character flaws that I don't love, but overall there's a certain way, a certain passion you have to bring to it, man. And I got to tell you, and we talk about it in the other sports, when you turn something off, it's very hard to turn it back on. So if you're going to take this 90-minute game and then basically throw away 20 minutes of it by just playing possession and playing kind of no-emotion soccer, first off, in one way, that's even more embarrassing that we're just going to play keep away. So you're embarrassing them even more by not actually playing. But when you take your emotional level down, that's just not the way you play. It's not the way you train. It's not the way you do anything. So again, we talked about this before. There's a difference between the fan watching and the person on the field. And for the person on the field, I understand there's ways that didn't have to be 13-0 with all the celebrating, but I can't go totally to the extreme where I say I'm disgusted and I don't understand it at all.
I just think the over celebrating was the major. Like you wanted to score 13, that's fine, I get it. But these were superstar players. Like these aren't players that I've never heard of before. And you know me, I don't watch soccer, and I've heard of two women. I mean, they're great players. Megan Rapinoe is.
Although it's consistent. If you watch any of those players at any game, even when you watch them in the professional league, they're going to play with that type of passion all the time.
It's not 13-0, and
I can understand.
What do you have to say about it?
I got to agree with you, Rich. I mean, it's not the goals; it's the celebration was not necessary. And at Greek, I get it. You got to keep playing, and they play hard, and there's emotion to it. But you know what? That is a huge character flaw. At some point, you got to say, you know what? I'm up 13-0. Take a step back. Just relax. You've got this in the bag. No one's scoring 13 goals on a tiebreaker. Let's be honest. Tiebreaker's not coming to 13. Take a second back. Just step back and go, you know what? I'm the best in the world, and I can do this. I don't need to be an ass. And that was just an ass move. It's an ass move.
No, listen, I'm not justifying it, but I'm trying to find the reasons why it happened. If that makes sense, because I will say there's 2 or 3 players on the team that there's character issues there that I don't think they're likable players. But for the most part, those are players that are they're great role models. They're people that young soccer players look up to, and that moment in time, maybe some of them would like to have it back, but you can see being amped up on that stage.
Let's take it back to Tatis, who hit the home run.
Right.
So I was watching Kirk Gibson hit a home run against a Hall of Fame pitcher in the World Series, and I'm not talking about Dennis Eckersley. I'm talking about Goose Gossage in 1984. And he, in the 8th inning, he put the game out of reach with a 3-run home run, and he went nuts. I've rarely seen a celebration like that wasn't a walk-off. He went crazy. But it was the World Series, Game 5. He knew his team just clinched a World Series win, basically. When Tatis hit that home run, you could argue whether he should have swung at 3-0. I mean, I think we all agree that he should have. But he acted like the game was up by 10 or 11, Like, he acted like, okay, cool, I hit a home run, but it wasn't a game-winning home run. These girls acted like they won the World Cup with that goal, and that is where my problem lies. You have to know, because it's disrespecting – that is when it is disrespecting the opponents. Like, when you over-cheer, when you're winning by a lot, that's a problem.
I would say, though, if they don't have that person, they do wind up winning that World Cup. And without that personality, maybe they don't. And that's the thing. And so maybe you may not like it. You may not agree with it. But that's just who they were. And that constant, just in your face, constant celebrating, we only know one way to play. Yeah, a lot of those teams, and we can look at them in every sport, they're just not going to be likable unless you're a fan of that team. You may not like that team because they play a certain way. But that way, 86 Mets, hated throughout baseball, but you play a certain way that if you didn't play that way, you wouldn't win. It's part of your personality, part of your DNA. But the one thing I would say, the one unwritten rule in soccer that's pretty cool is that if you were to get injured, right, if you go down, if there's an injury and there's a whistle because of the injury, now they stopped it because your team was injured, the other team's going to get the ball. But if you had possession and it didn't really impact the game, upon the restart, the other team, even though they have possession, and this is ingrained in you even from the time you're 6, 7 years old, the other team will just kick it right back to you, even though you have it, even though you got it. This happens on every level. Doesn't matter what level it is. If the play was stopped, if my team loses possession because I was hurt and you get possession, you're just going to kick it right back to me and allow me to play it out. Because I had possession when it was stopped.
A lot of times they fake injuries in soccer, like all the time. Every injury is fake, pretty much. Do they kick it back if they think it's fake injury?
Well, that's kind of a little different story. The fake injury, though, what you're talking about, fake injury, which, listen, it's gamesmanship.
Oh, right? I mean, way too much gamesmanship in soccer. It's one of the reasons why I dislike soccer, because, like,
it's the same thing. But you can't have your cake and eat it too. You're saying, well, you know what? I can bunt to break up a no-hitter because it's your job to stop me. All right, fine. Well, then don't let me go up 2-1. Because once I go up 2-1 and there's a running clock, what do you think I'm going to do? Speed up the game for you? No. And the referees have a job, so the referees get the game moving. Let's go. Keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving, keep it moving. So you could fake all the injuries you want. If it's blatant, yellow cards come out, red cards come out. But that's part of it. That's part of the sport. You don't appreciate the sport, but that's why don't get behind in a game with a running clock. If you get behind the other and that we talked about it, it can also backfire, because what happens is now if you did burn too much time and I do come back, now you just cost yourself, a point or more points. So, that's just part of the sport. You don't like it. From an American point of view, you look at it as faking injuries, which, by the way, NBA guys constantly flop. NHL guys constantly flop. Stop. So it's just you picking and choosing. There's a ton of flopping in the NHL. The NBA is worse than in soccer. So
no, that's not true. And the clock stops. See, that's the thing. It's such an easy fix. Stop the clock. there you go. I fixed soccer. Hero. Like, come on.
No.
No, it's called additional time. If the referee deems that, the referee will add that time. So if you did, what's that?
Additional time never evens
Then don't
out.
go behind. So that's part of it. That's why every second counts. That's why every second, every play, every minute in the game is huge, because once you go behind, now it's totally changed the strategy. It's changed the formation. It changed.
You like the thinking of injuries.
It's gamesmanship, and it's in
You
every
like it,
sport.
yes or no?
We can.
Yes or no, in soccer, you would not fix faking injuries. You like faking injuries. Yes or no?
Who says anyone's faking injuries? Okay, as someone who's played and coached soccer, absolutely. I will extend the game all the time. When the ball goes out of bounds, I'm taking my time for a throw-in. Absolutely. I will not speed up any one thing if I have the lead. It is too bad that you let me get the lead.
Hold on for a second. Richie, I'm a guy who hated soccer. Hated it. And in the last 10 years, I've gone a complete 180 with it. I accept the fact that that there are fake injuries. I accept the fact that there's a running clock. My mentality to the sport has changed simply because it is such a great game to watch. And the way it's played is unbelievable. And I root for a team that's in the fourth division in the English league. I mean, come on. It's pretty unbelievable.
But no one said it's a fake injury. This game is an extremely aggressive. So if I get kicked in the shin, but I'm down, I'm going to keep playing. If I get kicked in the shin, it hurts. So I'm up. I'm just going to go down. No one said these injuries are fake. It's just that I'm going to milk my time. You don't know that. You are accusing people of fake injuries. You don't know them. So you know what? I think what you're doing is reprehensible. You are accusing people of faking things. You don't know these people. This is character assassination right now. And frankly, I don't want any part of it. So we move on to hockey. And in hockey, you have unwritten rules in hockey too. And, look, some of the ones in hockey they're more superstitions. But there are unwritten rules, right? I mean, a lot of them do with fighting. No sucker punches and stop punching if a player's down.
They're amazing. Like, you don't fight. Your goon doesn't fight a good player. Your goon fights another team's goon, even though there's no more goons in hockey. But like, if you don't know how to fight, you're not fighting someone that does know how to fight. I mean, that's just hockey's a beautiful sport like that, and those are great unwritten rules, and nobody complains about them because no one's trying to hurt each other. Man, when Rick DiPietro got knocked out, Penguins goalie stopped punching him. It was perfect.
No, it's this code. I think it's just this code of conduct. An interesting one is that, like, what you notice is if there's a change, like a last second change during an odd man rush and a goal winds up being scored, it's like, you just screwed your teammate because you changed on this. You were changing in the process of changing on a breakaway anyway, and the breakaway goes in or the 2-on-1 goes in, and the other guy just stepped on the ice. Now he gets the minus and you don't. So what you see is the guy who just came off skates back on the ice and does this little circle and puts his hand up basically to the scorekeeper like, that's my minus. It's a little thing that when you're watching a hockey game, look for it on a goal on an odd man rush if there was this late change. And you'll see the guy come back onto the ice and be like, that's my negative, not my teammates. There's so many little things, and it's a tremendous code of conduct game. Don't spray my goalie, don't turtle, don't shoot high on the goalie in warm-ups, till a certain point in the warm-ups, don't cross the red line during warm-ups. It's just this kind of this conduct that you learn from such a young age, and it's pretty cool. I don't know what you think of it, Pete.
I with hockey, it's unbelievable because there are so many little things that go on during the game, before the game, that it's just something that's been ingrained. And unlike some of the insane things in baseball, which I can't stand, hockey is one of the few sports where I can sit here and say, you know what? It works. It works, and it keeps the sport from actually, game falling apart and things being a little nuts. I could only imagine what would happen if you crossed the red line, what would actually go on. But, it's definitely worth it. It's something – it may be the only sport where I'm okay with the unwritten rules.
The spraying of the goalie is fun too because, it's an unwritten rule, you don't do it, but it's also a kind of unwritten rule that there are times you should do it. When you want to fire up your own teammate, when you want to start – if I'm up 3-0 against your team, I don't want to have a fight. You want to have a fight with me to rile up your team, but I don't want to fight with you. So you might spray my goalie because now I have to fight you. Now I have to stick up for my goalie. It's brilliant. And that's how a lot of these fights happen and nobody thinks they're breaking a code. Everyone knows why they're doing it. Everyone knows now I have to push you. And it's fantastic. I mean, and as people like me and Dimitri played on the same team in hockey all the time. We played against each other, played for each other. If I'm winning, I never would hit the other team's goalie ever. I don't want to wake them up. If I'm losing, bam. Slash him in the arm. I know I'm not going to get a penalty. I know the ref's going to think I'm just going for the ball when I'm really not. But I know the other team's going to get mad, and it's going to hopefully wake up our team. And that's just something that's a lot of fun.
Richie, I'll tell you, I was a goalie playing lacrosse. If you hit me, I would knock your ass out, and did it multiple times. Trust me.
Let me tell you something. And Dimitri could back me up. I got in a fight with Jimmy Ayala, and Dimitri saw who the winner and who the loser was. Admit it, Dimitri.
I got to tell you, he's a scrappy hockey, but he could fight. And it definitely, I wasn't sure. This, by the way, we played together for a long time, and we were actually on opposing teams for this one. So it was different watching it, because you're seeing a friend fight against a teammate. But Richie, I got to tell you, man, he can fight.
But you know what? Let me tell you what Dimitri did. It was hilarious because, he was my good friend. He was Jimmy's teammate. And so he got mad at both of us because me and Jimmy had problems well before that. So it was bound to happen. Finally, I attacked him and we kind of went at it and I won. Dimitri took both of our sticks. He threw them both over, which is you should not be doing that to your teammate or against me. But I didn't care. It was just he's just a classy guy. And he was just what you two did was unclassy. He didn't know the history between us. It was squashed after that because when I win, then I could forgive. If I lose, I cannot forgive.
You know what another interesting one is in hockey, though, too, which is don't shoot on the net after the whistle.
Yes.
Yeah. And it's crazy, too, because basketball players will do this all the time, and it bothers hockey people. It would never happen in hockey. But it doesn't happen in hockey because of the goalie. There's no goalkeeper. There's no goaltender in basketball to disrespect. So after the whistle, a basketball guy will always get a free shot in. And I know, you watch basketball games with a hockey guy, and they'll be like, come on, you can't do that. But you're not disrespecting anybody. You can't shoot after the whistle in hockey because, that's the goalkeeper's space, man. That's his house. And you can't disrespect that.
What I don't understand is in football, when the coach calls a timeout right before the kicker's supposed to kick, and if I was the head coach, I'd be like, hey, you still snap the ball, you still kick because you'll get it. It's like golf. You'll get a good read on how the wind is. If you kick it, you'll get
most of it, that happens a lot.
But it also doesn't happen a lot. And if I were them, I would do it all the time. I mean, I just think it's a free kick right beforehand. That's awesome.
I agree with that. It's the same thing as taking a shot in basketball. Why not? Get the kick. But even more so in football because that you're adjusting to the elements of that time. I mean, you took your kick, you practiced your kicks before the game and at halftime. But at that particular moment from that particular spot, why not get that free kick in?
Now, if you're a kicker and they call a timeout, the coach calls a timeout and to ice you, and then you get it. Would you be allowed to glare at that coach? Hey, you tried, you failed. I would glare at the coach. I'd be like, don't try that on me. It doesn't work. I'd be angry and I'd want to shove it in his face.
Well, did you take your helmet off and glare at him? That's a penalty.
It's a 15. If it's at the end of the game, I most certainly would because then
game's over. You're saying.
Yeah, but I mean, that actually really.
At the end of the game, you do it. If there's still time left on the clock, you're going to get a penalty no matter what. If there's no time left on the clock, you're a kicker. You're pretty expendable, so you might not want to be an asshole.
Yeah, but I guess.
Your own team might not want to deal with that either.
Take a penalty, even if there's a few seconds left, and you're going to give them.
No, you don't take your helmet. You don't take your helmet off. You could glare at them and walk to them with keeping your helmet on. You're not going to get a penalty for that.
Why not? Why not, Rich? Just give him a glare, man.
I really want to see now. I want to become a professional in every sport. I want to become a kicker to do that. I want to become a forward in hockey so I could shave the ice on, spray the ice. I want that. I want to become a baseball player so I could dance on top of the dugout when Juan Soto hits a home run. I want to be able to do all this.
You want to break all the unwritten rules.
I would love to see Richie glare at a coach after a kick. So some 300-pound defensive lineman decides on the next play when he gets an opportunity to break his fucking knee. But that's a whole other story.
Let me tell you something. If I played for the U.S. women's national soccer team,
you would be dancing all around that field. You would have made it 14-0, and you would have been a woo, woo, woo.
I gotta tell you, if I coached against that team, I would have made sure someone took someone out. I'm sorry. After that, someone's getting.
Oh, and that's part of it too. Let me tell you something. If you're Taiwan, and that's though the soccer, see, you've got these cards that carry over, so that's a problem.
You lose 13-0, it's not a problem because your team sucks.
But I'm with Pete. You got to make sure it's the right person, and why not send the message? You want to keep doing that, so that's the other part of it. You know what? You can get on the team that's doing it, but then there's another team too that's got to stop them. And obviously, Taiwan and the U.S. are not anywhere on the same level. But one of those Taiwan players then really should have. And if we're talking about these unwritten rules, then you know what, Megan Rapinoe, you want to dance all around? I'm coming right at your knees.
I mean,
and that's that. So there is another team, and I got to this earlier when it comes to the Major League Baseball unwritten rules. There is another team that can react accordingly too. Don't forget that. And so the Taiwanese probably should have done something about that celebrating.
Wasn't it Thailand?
Was it Thailand or was it Taiwan? I don't remember.
I don't remember. You brought it up, so I don't even remember right now.
It's just like, you get hit with you get hit by a pitch, and there's a chance you're getting hit on the other side from it, depending on what that was.
It's funny because me and Dimitri, we played in a game like that in broomball because we were on the same broomball team.
Yeah, we did play a sport called broomball for a while.
And we lost like 35-0, Pete. I'm serious. It was like literally 35-0, and anyone that came across, and they were celebrating like they won the cup every time they scored. So I just started decking all the guys. It's co-ed. So I didn't hit the girls, but all the guys that came, one guy was like, "What the hell, man?" I'm like, "Keep celebrating." And, it was a lot of fun. And finally the ref said, "Hey, if you hit someone else, you're thrown out." And to this day, I regret not hitting someone else.
It was Thailand. It was Thailand.
I was right.
I keep saying Taiwan over here, but it was Thailand.
There comes a point where somebody, if you're getting shown up, you need to do something. Trust me. Like I said, I played goal in lacrosse. My defenseman, if they couldn't do it, I did it myself. I didn't care. I would throw myself at someone and knock someone down anytime. I got booed because I hit someone so damn hard on my own home field. I knocked a kid. I thought I gave him a concussion. So I get it. If someone tries to show you up, you got to make sure you stand your ground.
Absolutely, because you could lose. Like, you're allowed to lose. There are teams that are going to be better than you, and you're going to lose.
Absolutely.
That doesn't mean you have to lose your man card. And, or your woman card, you're still a competitor, you see it in MMA. Sometimes people won't shake your hand afterwards, or they're just a jerk, afterwards, that's just something that's a little tougher because they've just beaten you up.
Talk about the unwritten rule of the handshake in hockey. You don't miss or skip the playoff handshake, regardless of what happened, regardless how the series went, regardless how that game went. The playoff handshake is one of the great codes of conduct in hockey. Correct?
Yeah. I mean, I think we all agree that baseball is the worst with unwritten rules because it was kind of like it's an old school game. And honestly, we're talking about culture, race has to come into some of it, like the Hispanic culture, the Latin players.
Well, that's the thing. We talked about it. The game's becoming more global. And so you're bringing a lot of these cultures together, and there's going to be change, but it's a good kind of a change. And maybe the other sports haven't experienced that as much. I think the NBA, the game's become a little more global. And so you've seen some more change that way. Hockey may be a little bit more insulated. I think the cultures that played hockey, 50, 60 years ago are still those same cultures, and maybe that's allowed them to kind of keep the culture of the game the same way, possibly. But baseball definitely, as it's becoming more global, it's dealing with those changes. But I think all those changes are fun changes. They're good changes.
When McGregor knocked out Aldo, remember, he was doing so much in MMA. He was trash talking him, stole his belt. And it was supposed to be this giant fight. One punch knockout was 8 or 13 seconds. And after the match, he's like, "I respect him. He's a great fighter." And he stopped the trash talking. He won the fight. This trash talking's over. I think that's part of the problem with Ronda Rousey. She wouldn't shake Misha Tate's hand one time. So it was kind of I believe it's all about respect. And in football and basketball, there's so much trash talking that you trash talk during the game. After the game, you give your bro hug.
Yeah, that's also your generalizing. I think we can agree that that hockey has this great code of conduct across the board, but there's plenty of great conduct in football and basketball.
Well, look at football. Look at the end of the game when both end of the game you get the ultra religious, the real Christian players going. They all kneel down and they pray together. Both teams,
right, their own brotherhood.
Not do it. It's really. Football and hockey have a lot of good stuff that goes on.
Yeah, and basketball too. There's a code that these players grow up with learning in the AAU, and there's definitely a code of conduct. Now, you might say one of the knocks on the NBA is that the players are a little bit too friendly. They kind of know each other growing up, and that kind of comes across sometimes on the court where these guys almost have this brotherhood that some people interpret as a lack of competition, although I think that goes a little bit too far. Basketball has its own culture too, where these guys have played against each other, know each other since the time they were 6, 7, 8 years old. They're going to the same tournaments, and there's a nice culture there as well. It's interesting. A lot of the basketball culture, though, too, has to do with popular culture. Rules about who wears what sneakers and pregame attire and postgame attire. But that's also a cultural thing. It's a new generation, and basketball has kind of changed with that over the years as well.
Here's one that I had a problem with. Not a big problem. Like, I don't really care, but it's just when Tom Brady lost to the Eagles, he didn't shake Nick Foles' hand. And I just felt like, well, Matt Ryan just shook your hand after he blew after his team blew a 28.3 lead. He made sure to come in what had to be one of the worst moments of his life. He went, to your 3R, his 3R lane, shook your hand like a man, and then walked off. Like, and you're not going to shake Nick Foles' hand. Like, I just kind of felt like you'll shake your hand. Like, for me, if you don't shake hands when you win, I'm okay with not shaking hands when you lose. But don't be the guy that shakes your hand only after I win. Like, that bothers me.
I'm not gonna defend it, but I will. It's a lot like with the women's soccer players. I think it just makes Brady who he is. The guy is so ultra intense competitive that in that moment he lost a Super Bowl and he's not thinking, and I don't know the guy. So maybe he is a jerk. But in that moment, the only thing that he could think about is, I lost this Super Bowl. Is that, and there's no other thought. There's not the thought of my responsibility at this moment to what I might look like on camera, my responsibility to go shake a hand. And that's what has made Brady so successful over 20 years. I'm telling you, man, you can't just turn this personality stuff on and off. And maybe the guy in Matt Ryan, and I don't know him either, but maybe the guy that's so ready to go and win and go ready to shake hands when losing, maybe that's the same part of your personality that allowed you to be defeated when you were up 28-3.
Let me just say one thing, Pete. I'll go right to you. I'm going to bring up a New England quarterback that didn't end his career on a pick six, Cam Newton. He gave in the Super Bowl, he left the press conference. And I had no problem with that because I'd be a sore loser then too. I just think that, he gave some answers, left the press conference, but shake the hand. If you win 5 or 6 Super Bowls, shake the hand of the guy that just beat you. But Pete, what were you going to say?
I was going to talk about Belichick, who is a competitor in his own right. He's the greatest coach of all time. And he always shakes hands at the end of the game, no matter what. And every coach does that. But almost every quarterback does too. If you really think about it,
every player does.
No, I think with Brady, it's just that moment in the Super Bowl where it's what could have been, and it's what makes him who he is. And I just think it's kind of a moment in time where, you forget where you are and you forget what's going on.
The coaching handshake in the NFL is the only handshakes I ever want to see. I hate seeing the handshakes in any other sport because they're always so like, good game, good, whatever. The coaching handshake, especially when you deal with Belichick, is great. Remember when he threw the camera guy down to win the Jets, when he went to the Jets coach? Who was it? That
Mangini?
Yeah, Mangini. Because there was a whole big thing about will they shake each other's hands, and then there was a camera guy. He takes the camera guy, he shoves him down.
Poor camera guy.
But then one time, Gibbs and Parcells had a handshake, and Parcells won. So he goes to shake his hand earnestly, and Gibbs quickly shakes it, looks away, and then just barely touches his hand. And then Gibbs beats Parcells a couple weeks later, and Gibbs goes to give one, and Parcells does the same exact thing. I just love that these 65-year-old men are such babies. I think that's great for the sport. I really do. I love it.
Yeah, but again, are they babies or are they just these super driven competitive people?
Maybe.
If they weren't super driven competitive people, I don't think they'd be coaching, in the Super Bowl.
Yeah,
you're mentioning Parcells and Gibbs and Belichick. So
they're great. They're great. That doesn't mean they're not babies, right? You could be both.
I just think you're so super competitive that it gets all right. You want to say babies? I'm just looking at it as a super competitive guy that's just basically at the end of the game, just not in the mood for a handshake or.
That's my point. If you win, for me, if you win and you shake hands, and I'm real happy and give a good handshake and whatever, you lose, you better do the same thing. That's all I'm saying. Because if you win and you don't,
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree. But the only thing is that in these other sports, so in the NBA and in football, those handshakes happen after every single game, regular season game, playoff game, correct? And so you're going to have these moments that you mentioned. Whereas in hockey, they don't. These moments happen only after the end of a playoff series. Yeah. So it's easy to just protect that little, part of your culture, of your code of conduct, where everybody knows when the playoff series is over, we're going to go shake hands. And we have to do it no matter what. With those other two sports, that handshake happens all the time. And when it does happen all the time, you're going to have those moments, like you've mentioned, whether it was with Brady or with Gibbs or with Parcells, because it's every game, preseason, regular season, playoff, Super Bowl. And if it's going to be every game, there's going to be some drama involved. And if hockey did this every single game, that little, piece of their culture probably would not be as sacred and would not be as protected, because it would just become more the norm, and it would lend itself to more drama and more stupidity and more, just more of these little moments that might happen.
And you're right. And you know what? The Pistons, the bad boy Pistons, after when they lost to the Bulls in the playoffs, they all left with like 8 seconds left. Yeah. And they didn't shake anybody's hand. And, they hugged each other and they kind of smiled because they thought it was kind of funny. And they were like, all right, we're done. Our greatness is over. It's Michael Jordan's time. And I'm a hypocrite because I actually enjoyed that. And I kind of respected that they were such jerks, because that's who they were. They were the bad boys. But they did shake Michael Jordan's hand when they beat him. So it's hypocritical, but that's who they were. My favorite athlete, like it's going to surprise you, is Kevin Garnett. I love Kevin Garnett. I love Paul Pierce. I love how
competitors, man. They're competitors. They're leaders.
Yeah. I love how petty Paul Pierce is right now to LeBron James. Any interview you hear about Paul Pierce, LeBron's not one of the top five. I don't think Paul Pierce would say LeBron would beat me in one-on-one. That's how petty he is. And I love it. I just like, he doesn't like LeBron because LeBron beat him. And you know what? I'm going to be petty to LeBron the rest of my life. And I kind of respect you being such a poor sport.
Yeah, but that's the point about Brady and the women's soccer team. You just are who you are, and it makes you who you are. And I think the same reason that Pierce and Garnett became these NBA champions, it's why they continue to act that way now, man. You're driven a certain way, dude, and it's for better or worse. Last word on the unwritten rules, Rich? Anything to say about the unwritten rules? We said we were going to shrink the book, and man, we've talked about it for a while.
We got to make the book into a pamphlet. We got to realize that, it's today's game. Let the players, let the 2020 players in all sports decide what the unwritten rules are and go by that. And if you're over a certain age or you're not in that league, because all leagues are different. So if you're not a major league ball player, you really shouldn't be talking about it. I mean, we need to because it's our podcast. But that's pretty much it. Let them decide. If they're okay with it, then you should be okay with it.
Pete?
Baseball's got to figure itself out in more ways than one. That's as simple as it gets. There's too many unwritten rules in baseball. It's time to just move on and deal.
So that's a wrap. That's a wrap for this podcast. It's time for us to get this time machine back to the future. Again, wherever, whenever, however you joined us, we thank you. We appreciate it. We had a lot of fun spending some time with you. We can't wait to spend some more time with you next time. So for Pete Sod and Rich Glanzer, I'm Dimitri Adrakis. This has been the Sports Pod Time Machine presented by Yackers Huddle. Again, until next time, take care, everybody.
Copyright 2021 Yackers Huddle Media Group, Inc., all rights reserved.